Hi, it's Brigid, your snake diet warrior, coming to you today to talk to you a little bit about something that I've been waiting to talk about. I was waiting until I was in a better place, physically and emotionally, to talk about it. The real truth about what happened with me at Fat Camp and some of the things that go on there. This is a snake diet fat camp that was created by Cole in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And what happened was Cole posts a message on his snake diet motivation group and asked if anybody would be interested in coming to a fat camp he was creating. And I'm not sure what else was on the message, but he wanted information. So, a lot of people were responding there, but I went straight to his inbox and I hounded him for a long time. I was in a horrible place. I was supposed to be in remission from Lyme disease and still had all these symptoms. Because I wasn't getting any better, I started binging on foods. I have a binge eating disorder, and I know this is a little shocking, but I was eating up to 1.5 gallons of ice cream a day, and that doesn't seem quite possible, but I can guarantee you I was doing that and craving more, and I piled on the weight. My weight usually runs around 130, normally without watching my diet, but I had reached almost 200 pounds, and I'm 5'3", very small frame. And I couldn't get a hold of my eating, even though I had a counselor in Fargo who specializes in eating disorders. I was right there in a clinic for eating disorders, and it just seemed like there was really nothing for binge eating disorders other than a pill they would give you, which was Vyvanse, and it did not do a thing for me. It didn't speed me up, slow me down, or take away the cravings. I even tried Wellbutrin again to see if I could slow down the cravings, and that too did not help at all. So yes, I bugged Cole, shared with him my history of having Lyme disease over 30 years before I could go into remission. I hate to say 35 plus years, but that's actually it. I just want to stay at 30 plus years. The eating disorder and being, very obese for me, and having a tough time breathing, walking around. It was really ugly to me, and I was desperate. I felt like I needed somebody or someplace to go to save my life. And I had, looked on the internet for fat camps or places that I could go just to focus and be isolated and deal with the weight, the symptoms. And maybe my symptoms were a little exaggerated because I was anxious and depressed, and that can aggravate everything from pain to panic attacks. Well, anyway, I begged him to let me come, and he finally gave in and said yes. And one of the things I started to do was I was on 22 different prescription medications I was taking a day, and so I started weaning myself off of most of the medications that I could, and I knew this was going to be a challenge, but praying that as I fast and go in autophagy, that I could heal some of these things without medication. I knew it was going to be a tough road. But anyway, mid-October, I took off to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada from Breckenridge, Minnesota. 19-hour drive, and I had not driven more than 2 hours in the last 7 years, and that was, just recently, like in the last year, driving to see my Lyme disease doctor and coming back. I usually had a driver for most of the things I did. Anyway, so I drove up from here to the Minot and going, straight up to a port there to get in Canada. This is a little bit funny, but I crossed the border and I was sent inside because I didn't have my passport with me. My passport was going to expire at the end of December, so I renewed it in October with a rush, and it hadn't arrived. But you can enter Canada from the United States with your driver's license. You can't get back into the United States without your passport. Kind of interesting, but it is what it is. Anyway, so they let me in, and that I had to have an interview because it was my driver's license, and asked me what I was going up to Canada for. And I was trying to tell them that it was a health camp, a place to lose weight, and I was dealing with symptoms similar to MS. It was so very personal, the reasons why I was going up there, but they were for healthcare concerns. One of the people that were working there, patrol people, asked me if I had electronic devices in my car, and I said yes. My cell phone's there, and also my computer, my laptop, and she wanted the passwords to it, so I gave it to her. I have nothing to hide. Well, anyway, she came back in about an hour later, and she brought me into a room, shut the door, and told me I was lying, and she pointed out the law about just being deceitful, and she asked me, "Who is Cole Robinson?" Oh, I got grilled. She asked me, "You don't have MS?" And I said, "I didn't say I had MS. I have symptoms that are similar to MS. I've had Lyme disease for a long time, and Lyme disease is called the great imitator. And, some people with ALS, they have been diagnosed and then later found out it was Lyme disease. It's a great imitator." But anyway, she sat there and she asked me questions about, "Is Cole your lover? Are you going up there to sleep with him?" And I'm going, "No, I'm going up there to lose weight, to get healthy." And I didn't think I was being deceiving, but she twisted their regulations on going to Canada, and I was discharged from that port, and told that I couldn't enter under these circumstances, and that I had to go to another port and go port shopping. Well, I'm like, well, what do you do? Okay, so what I did was I entered back into the United States because I was kicked out of Canada, came back around because she said pick any port, go to any port. Why not the same port? I'm not going to put on more miles that day. So I the guys in Canada that searched my car, they had a cigarette outside afterwards and came in laughing. They said, "Well, we know who you talked to." They said, "Go ahead, try it again." So I came around and produced my driver's license, and they said, pull around, and so I did. I pulled around, went in, and I brought this piece of paper that they gave me that I wanted to enter the Canada, and I had to talk to them, and they asked me, "Do you know the reason why you were denied access before?" And I said, "The person who interviewed me thought I was being deceitful." Long story short, they had me take a chair. 5 hours later, they finally interviewed me again, and they really rode me hard. They rode me completely hard, from my diagnoses to my medications. I mean, it was really ridiculous. It was nighttime it was dark before I got out of there. So I enter into Canada. Did not know that my Walmart cell phone carrier did not give me access to a phone or GPS in Canada. I have no map. I have nothing to go on. And so all I did was point my car, made sure it said north or northwest, and I just kept driving. And I drove that night for a couple more hours and stopped in some town. I did get on the internet to write out a little map for myself, but it was really rough. And when I left that next morning, no GPS, just continued to go northwest. and I had one more night stay somewhere and continued on to Canada. That was really tough. The other thing that I learned, for 5 days during the travel and just before I left, I was fasting all the way to Canada. So, when you get to a certain point and you're supposed to be alert, I wasn't real alert towards the end, and I was kind of panicky. I think my blood sugar was dropping or whatever. But anyway, when I got into Alberta, Canada, the nice thing is once in a while I would have cell service, or not cell service, but GPS on my phone. I was just going, oh, this is great. So when I did get in Edmonton, I did have some GPS, found the house that Cole was at, Fat Camp, and I was so excited to be there and have found it. I got out of my car, carried a few things up to the door, knocked on it, and he said, welcome. And I think I was wide-eyed and wiry, and he had another snake diet coach there, and I went out to the car and I started to collapse. I fell to my knees. I couldn't carry anything. I was just weak as could be. And I know Cole was going, what did I get myself into? And bless his heart, he didn't say anything to me right away, but I know what they were thinking, and he shared with me what they were thinking at a later time. That evening, I don't remember much. I don't remember being unloaded from my car. I don't remember getting myself ready for bed. I did sleep on the floor. I brought a mattress cover for a mattress that I had that had a pillow top, and I folded it in half and used that as my bed on the floor. But I could feel the hard floor through that, and was not the most comfortable. But I would have done anything to stay at Fat Camp and have my life turned around. Stairs were just incredibly rough. My body was going through shock because the rest of the medications that I was supposed to go off of, I quit before I got in my car, along with fasting. So I was detoxing, or my body was in a little bit of shock because I wasn't taking those medications, and I can't remember which I stopped when, but I didn't give my body a whole lot of time. It was do or die, or now or never, and so that's basically what I did. The next day or two, Cole and I were talking. I have to look at my notes because there was so much that happened back there. He asked me a question about how I was speaking, and I said something to him. I said, are you noticing that I slur my speech? And he said yes, and I'm aware of it, and it must have been some medication I was on, or I do have some neurological damage in my brain. I had to learn to speak again, and when I'm fatigued, I might slur a bit, but I'm really aware of that. Another thing he noticed, and would ask me, your lips are completely purple. And yes, the house was cold, but not that cold. And a lot of that had to do with the hiatal hernia pushing up into my chest cavity, restricting, my heart from functioning properly, and my lungs. And as Maya says, there's no food in the house. You can't cheat. The only thing that was there was the ingredients to make snake diet juice, or snake juice. And of course there was some coconut water in the fridge too. The house was empty. There's no furniture in the house. There's not a chair to sit on, nothing, just the floor or the bed that you brought with you. It was very minimalist, and I learned to appreciate it and figure out why he did that. We had several conversations about how I brought more to the house than what he even owned. And he talked about if I was evicted from here, or I had to move very quickly. I could do that in just one afternoon, by myself. I don't have to ask friends to help me. I can go. It's a sense of freedom that he has that I know I've been wanting to move for several years, but I have too much stuff, and the stuff that I have just seems overwhelming to go through and get rid of. And I am working on that, by the way. Um, but anyway, I expected to stay there till January 1st or February 1st, we had talked about, and getting my weight down from the 188 that I started at to, or 196 was my highest weight that I was aware of because I stopped weighing myself. We were going to get me down to 120, or by February 1st, 114. And I brought different size clothing, so, but it still didn't matter. I brought way more than really I should have. After about 5 days, Cole came to me and he just said, Brigid, I have noticed you've been here for 5 days and you haven't smiled once. Having somebody tell you that, it's kind of hard. Is that how I appear? I don't smile. We talked about living minimally, and we talked about me being isolated and what little relationships I had out there because I was so isolated at home, and repairing them. The first week, some of the things I dealt with physically were esophageal spasms. They were so bad. I'm grateful that I knew what they were instead of me thinking it might be a heart attack. I had a lot of chest pain. I had GERD, even though I was on the snake juice. My hernia was bothering me. That's at least what I was guessing. I slept at 45 degrees. We spoke about different things you can do with a hiatal hernia. I began drinking warm water in the morning, waiting a minute, and then rising up on my tippy toes and dropping down very hard on the heels of my foot to try to pop that fundus of the hiatal hernia, fundus of the stomach, back down to get it out of my chest cavity. And I would repeat that about 10 times, sometimes 15 times. And within days, my symptoms had gone down. But I had to continue doing that exercise every morning, drinking warm water and dropping to my heels to force that fundus back down into the stomach. A little over a week went by, everything was fine. I went out for a walk. I was using these walking trek sticks, and I stopped at a corner to let some cars go by, and one of the sticks folded on me. I believe that I was putting more weight on the sticks than I should have. Because I was weak, I probably should have been walking just with my cane. I stopped, car went by, my trek stick started to collapse, and I fell straight backwards, hit my head on the concrete. And the car that went by pulled over. She was a trauma nurse, and there was another gal that was walking by who was in school for nursing, and I was examined. She felt my head. She said, I watched you hit the concrete. They helped me up, and this gal said, I recommend you go to the emergency room. I saw how hard you hit your head, and that's not something you should let go. So that was the recommendation. Well, I got back to the house. It wasn't that far away from home. I wish that it hadn't happened, but a series of events happened. I got home. I went upstairs. I did tell Cole that I had a little fall, and I went upstairs, did a video. My voice was shaking. That was something I noticed, and I didn't really care for that. The body does some really interesting things. Usually protection. When I was done uploading that video, I went in the bathroom to get something to drink, get another thing of snake juice, and my legs started collapsing underneath me, and things were going blurry, and I just didn't feel right. I felt like I was going to pass out, I wanted to go to bed. So I put my pajamas on. I was heading towards the bed, and I got down on my bed, and I thought, oh, this doesn't feel right. I may not wake up from this. That's what was going through my head. Anyway, I started walking towards the stair steps, and when I got to the stair steps, I couldn't walk anymore. So I started crawling, scooting down the steps on my butt. I crawled a little bit downstairs. Cole was around, and I was just in a mess, panicky, and I couldn't crawl anymore. All I could do was scoot on my butt. I must have freaked him out. I know that I'm a lot older, and I've seen a lot more illness than my share of illness than a lot of people have. And he was very concerned, and my speech was garbled. I don't think he could really understand it. And he asked me, "Do you want me to call an ambulance?" And I asked for the ambulance. My brain was going 100 miles an hour thinking this was a stroke, and strokes are the #1 killer and disabler in my family. I watched my mother have a horrible stroke. My father, I saw 4 strokes. I have brothers and sisters who have had many strokes, or brother who's had a stroke. I have a nephew who's had a couple strokes, who's in his early 40s. I can't begin to tell you what fear was inside of me. Well, what happened when the ambulance got there, they took me to the ambulance, and she checked my blood sugar, and my blood sugar was 2 point something, which was extremely low. She asked me what I'd eaten that day. I told her I was fasting, and boy, did I get a lecture. I can't remember everything she said because my brain was a little off, and the guy wanted to give me a painkiller. I didn't really care for one, but he ended up giving me fentanyl, which is fine. I survived. Ended up in the hospital. They brought me a sandwich immediately. It was like a egg salad sandwich and apple juice, and I ate that. Finally got me into a room, and the nurses came in and pulled blood. And the doctor came back in about an hour and said, "Feed that woman. Her blood sugar is not going up." So they had to feed me a second meal within an hour and a half. And I got another sandwich and apple juice. CAT scan was normal. Blood sugar, finally got it into a normal range. And the doctor came to me, and he said, "I'd like to, talk to you about what happened so that you kind of understand what happened to you. We usually call the series of events that happen to you a metabolic event or a neurogenesis event. Metabolic is probably what I was having, since it wasn't a stroke, and hitting my head, my body kind of went into a panic mode and somehow dropped my blood sugar because of the shock or whatever. And I got sick, and we did talk about the symptoms. Very similar to, it presents very similar to a stroke. And so I wasn't wrong. I was wrong that it was a stroke, but the symptoms were near like a stroke. 12 hours later, I was discharged. And after I was home and resting some more, Cole and I spoke about possibly me leaving fat camp. And, because he wasn't sure how really sick I was. Are we going to repeat an event like this? He wanted me somewhere safer within my country so I could access medical care if I need be. I was hoping that this wouldn't be, and it'd be an isolated event and we could get through it. But he had some really good points, and I guess I totally agreed with him that continue on the snake diet. He will support me, and leave here, go on a trip. He even suggested that I take off, have somebody sell my house for me, find some place to live, and just go on with life and just start fresh. there was too many things at home that I had to purge. So you see what's pinning me down. My things. My things. We even talked about, me flying back when I'm stronger and I've reached my goal and I've been real stable for a long time. You know, so I stayed about 2.5 weeks at fat camp, maybe a little bit longer, but not quite 3 weeks. I did lose 15 pounds. But after all this and really sticking to myself and focusing on, and meditating on what steps are next in my life, I was really positive when I left, and I was just going to head straight south so that I could get cell service faster, and I would end up in Montana, where I could visit my aunt, who I hadn't seen for 30 years, and she was in an assisted living home. But 2 days before I left, I think this is significant, and I'd like to share with you. The people from Fat Camp, Allison, Maya, and myself, were downstairs speaking to Cole, and I was sitting on the stair steps, and I turned and looked at him, and he looked at me and said, "Your eyes are the clearest I've seen them. They look normal. They look really good." And that's what, the snake diet's all about, is the healing and transformation. And I was so tickled that he could see that in me. I was so happy to hear that. It's such a little thing, but it really meant a lot to me. Maya and Alice and I did a farewell video, and as I said, as soon as I got my passport in the mail, I jumped in my car and headed straight south without GPS. And I ended up in Montana, and I got to Great Falls and visited my aunt for 2 days, and that was in mid-November. And I was so grateful to visit with her, be there for 2 days. And on May 26th, the day after Christmas this year, she passed away. And God works in mysterious ways. I'm so grateful that it turned out that way. I traveled for 2 weeks and visited as many people as I possibly could that were available, because it was really short notice. I got to see my nephew Mike, who I hadn't seen for maybe 7 years. One of my best friends, who we kept in contact, through Facebook, but seeing her was absolutely wonderful, and her brother, and some other things. I mean, it was just wonderful. I ended up getting home well after Thanksgiving, and I continue my accountability videos and pictures to go to Cole. I follow snake diet, 72 twos with occasional 96, and I have been purging. Before Christmas, I purged like crazy, many boxes to the thrift store, and I sold a couple things online, which is kind of icing on the cake. One of my videos, I talked about, instead of me owning things, things are owning me, and that's really the case that I have experienced. And I also thought, instead of me having this extra fat on me, the fat actually has me. It restricted me from breathing properly, walking properly. Going out in public, I was ashamed. Didn't take care of myself like I should. There's a lot of hindrances with extra things. So I am going to continue with the snake diet lifestyle. I want to be an authentic me. I want to be the best me possible. I want to be authentic. I don't want all these things that are in my closet that I don't wear. As I lose weight, though, I have a box downstairs that things out of the dryer I fold and put in the box that, you know, have become loose on me, and I'm getting rid of a lot of things that way. I hope my video will inspire many of you, and it's been great to talk about, you know, fat camp, and, you know, the things that I learned in from Cole and, you know, Maya and Allison that I still follow. And I just want to thank you for listening to my video, and, you know, please like this video if there was anything that you could take away from it, and please, you know, subscribe and share if you would, and we'll talk soon again, my tribe. Thank you.